The ice in her glass had long since melted, transforming the expensive single malt whiskey into a pathetic, lukewarm pool. Ade Alayemi didn't taste it anyway. Each mechanical sip was a ritual of self-control, a way to anchor her hands, to give her mind something to process besides the devastating, pixelated horror replaying behind her eyes. Minj and Hyejin. Her fiancé and her stepsister. The video, deliberately grainy but instantly recognizable, was burned onto her consciousness. Minjae's hands, the ones that were supposed to be slipping a diamond wedding band onto her finger in precisely 7 days, were tangled possessively in Hyejin's lightened hair. Hyejin's head was thrown back in a laugh that had once been part of Ade's family soundtrack. Now, it was the sound of a public execution of her dignity. Welcome to Afro-Korean Soul Channel. Before we get into the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Let's go. A week. One agonizing week until what should have been the happiest day of her life, the culmination of years of navigating the complex, tradition-steeped hierarchy of the Han Tech dynasty. Now, it was a public funeral for her pride. Her phone lay face down on the polished, dark ebony table of the exclusive Gangnam VIP lounge, buzzing incessantly. It was a frantic, angry hive of notifications, friends, frenemies, and reporters hungry for a quote from the jilted black bride who had almost married into one of Korea's most powerful tech families. The lounge, tucked away in Cheongdam-dong, was a sanctuary of midnight blue velvet, low, amber lighting, and the kind of profound silence that was bought, not given. Ade had bribed the maitre d' an obscene amount of Korean won to be left completely alone, and he had complied, stationing a discreet, hulking bouncer to ensure her solitude. Here, in the plush, isolated booth, she finally allowed the mask of stunned composure to fracture. Her long, wavy, rich dark hair cascaded over one shoulder, a curtain shielding her face. She was curved, her body defined by muscle hidden beneath soft flesh, perfectly contoured but never overtly large, a figure that drew sharp, appreciative, and often possessive stares in a city accustomed to a more delicate silhouette. Tonight, however, she felt nothing but a raw, aching vulnerability. A single, hot tear escaped, tracing a path through her meticulously applied foundation, only to be swiped away with a furious jerk of her hand. Humiliation was a cold, viscous creature coiled deep in her gut, heavy as a stone. Heartbreak was a sharper, more familiar ache, the splintering of the carefully constructed future she had built alongside Minj within the Han Group's structure. But pride, that was the straight line of her spine against the velvet banquette, the fire in the tepid whiskey she refused to put down. It was the only thing keeping her from dissolving into a pathetic puddle on the floor of this pristine, isolating sanctuary. The soft, expensive swish of the heavy door separating her booth from the outside world made her flinch violently. "I said I was not to be disturbed," she snapped, her voice rough, hoarse from unshed tears and the few sips of alcohol she hadn't merely pretended to take. The bouncer, usually immovable, had clearly been surprisingly persuadable. A low baritone voice answered, a sound like rough silk, devoid of the false sympathy and cloying pity she had been drowning in all day. It was a voice that commanded the very air in the room to still, to pay attention. She looked up. Han Jun-suk stood there. He was Min-jae's older brother, the infamous black sheep, the one who cast a shadow in every room, whose presence was not a charming, bright sun, but a gravitational pull of something darker, more substantial, and infinitely more dangerous. He was the actual power behind the Han Group's recent global tech dominance, a self-made billionaire who had bought his way back into his family only to eclipse them all. Jun-suk was taller, broader, and significantly more physically imposing than Min-jae. His wavy, shoulder-length hair, the color of rich, dark mahogany, framed a face that was undeniably handsome, carved with sharp angles and a hint of ruthless intensity. He wore a simple, exquisitely tailored black silk shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and crisscrossed by a tapestry of tattoos, intricate, flowing patterns and cryptic Korean script, a stark contrast to the clean, polished image his brother cultivated. His skin, a healthy, sun-kissed tan, made the black ink stand out even more, a visual story of rebellion and power. His eyes, a stormy, penetrating dark gray that missed nothing, scanned her face, her tear tracks, the slight tremble in her lip, the defiant set of her shoulders. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her like a cold, brilliant strategist assessing a battlefield that had just been handed to him. The sexual chemistry, always a barely contained hum of dark, antagonistic energy between them, flared immediately, thick and suffocating in the small space. "What do you want, Jun-suk?" she asked, her weariness seeping through the cracks of her anger. "If you're here to deliver a family apology, you can save it. I'm fresh out of forgiveness for the Han name." A ghost of a smile, cold and sharp as a freshly forged blade, touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes, which remained fixed on hers with that disconcerting intensity. "The Han family has nothing to apologize for. My brother's lack of discipline is his own failing, Ade," he replied, his voice a dangerous murmur. He didn't wait for an invitation, simply sliding into the booth opposite her. The already intimate space instantly felt claustrophobic, charged with a potent energy she was too heartbroken and simultaneously too aroused to decipher. The subtle, expensive scent of his cologne, oud and musk, mixed with cold night air and a hint of metallic ozone, wrapped around her, invading her senses. "He is your brother," she stated, as if he needed reminding of the ties of blood. "He is a boy who was given a masterpiece and chose a forgery," Jun-suk replied, his voice flat, dismissive. He gestured with a slight tilt of his head toward her phone, which had just lit up with another desperate alert, a headline she couldn't bear to read. "They're laughing at you, Ade. The blogs, the society pages, your so-called friends," he continued, his tone a deliberate, cruel lash. "They've already written you off as the tragic, humiliated punchline, the black girl who almost made it into the Han chaebol, but failed spectacularly. Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice trembling with suppressed rage and shame. "To rub salt in the wound? To see the spectacle up close?" "On the contrary," he said, leaning forward slightly, his elbows resting on the polished table. The proximity was startling, forcing her to inhale the intoxicating, dangerous blend of his scent. His eyes, now mere inches from hers, were smoldering. "I'm here to hand you the knife, Ade Alayemi. The biggest, sharpest knife in Seoul." She stared at him, the fog of the whiskey receding under the sheer, brutal intensity of his gaze. Her breath hitched. The air between them was so thick it felt like velvet smoke, full of unspoken history and dark attraction. "My brother took what was yours, your future, your pride, your position in the next generation of the Han group," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more penetrating than a shout. The raw, possessive heat in his eyes was almost unbearable. "He paraded your humiliation for the world to see. You can curl up here, drink diluted whiskey, and let them win, or you can stand up, take back your power, and make them pay a price that will bankrupt their pride." A bitter, broken laugh escaped her throat. "And how, in this highly publicized, digitally recorded circus, do you propose I do that, Jun-suk? Challenge him to a duel? Hack his entire network and send his finances to the dark web?" The corner of his mouth twitched, the ghost of a triumphant smirk. He didn't hesitate. "Marry me." The two words hung in the charged, silent air between them, sucking all the oxygen from the room. Ade was certain she had misheard. The alcohol had to be distorting his words, or perhaps the trauma was making her hallucinate. "What?" "Marry me," Han Jun-suk repeated, his tone utterly pragmatic, cold, and final, as if he were proposing a corporate takeover, which, in essence, he was. "Next Saturday. Same church, same venue, same guest list. Let them see you not broken, but instantly, dramatically upgraded. Chosen by the Han they were always too afraid to talk about, the one who actually controls the future of Han tech." He paused, letting the magnitude of the offer settle upon her shoulders. Let Min-jae watch, from the sidelines, as you become my wife. Let him understand exactly what he threw away and who he lost it to. You will become the mistress of my life, the face of my empire. It was utter madness. It was vengeance served on a platinum platter, drenched in the forbidden desire that had always simmered beneath their surfaces. Her heart, a bruised and battered thing, hammered violently against her ribs. This wasn't a proposal of love. It was a declaration of war, and he was offering her the prime position on the front lines, right beside the most dangerous man in Seoul's tech landscape. You're insane, Jun-suk, she breathed, the word catching in her dry throat. I'm opportunistic, he corrected, his voice a dark caress. This isn't about sympathy, Ade. It's about strategy, and it's about claiming what's rightfully mine. He leaned in closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his large, muscular frame. The scent of sandalwood intensified. You get your pride back, publicly and spectacularly. I get. He paused, the strategic facade dropping for a brief, terrifying second. And for the very first time, she saw a flicker of something profoundly raw, possessive, and hungry in the depths of his gray eyes, a deep, coiled desperation. I get to finally take what should have been mine from the start. The implications settled over her, cold and shocking, yet electrifying. Had he wanted her all this time? Even when she was preparing to marry his brother. Let's destroy him together, Jun-suk whispered, the offer a seductive poison delivered straight into her ear. Say yes, Ade, and let the games begin. She looked at him, at the dark intensity, the brutal honesty, the dangerous promise shimmering behind his handsome face and the powerful ink of his tattoos. It was a leap into the abyss, a desperate clutch at salvation forged in the fires of revenge and undeniable, mutual desire. Her pain and her pride, twin serpents of fury, twisted within her. Half out of the soul-crushing agony Minj had inflicted, half out of the fierce, surviving pride that demanded retribution and power. Ade Alayemi looked into the eyes of the devil, Han Jun-suk, and made her choice. Yes. The single, resonant word hung in the velvet-swathed air of the lounge, a word that felt too small, too quiet for the cataclysm it promised. In its wake, a profound silence descended, broken only by the frantic thrum of Ade's own heartbeat in her ears. She had just agreed to marry a man whose reputation was woven with threads of shadow and ruthlessness, a man she knew more intimately through unspoken tension and visual appraisals than through conversation. Han Jun-suk didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He simply gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, as if she had just confirmed a highly profitable tech merger. The storm in his dark gray eyes banked, replaced by a cool, calculating focus that was terrifying in its precision. Good, he said, his voice all business, the sensual undertone barely masked. He pulled out his phone, its sleek black surface a startling contrast to the opulent surroundings. We begin now. Now. Ade's voice was a rasp. The whiskey-fueled bravado was rapidly receding, leaving a cold, nauseating dread in its wake. What exactly does now entail? Damage control and the first strategic strike, he explained, already typing a swift message, his thumbs moving with practiced efficiency across the screen. My car is outside. My driver, Alexander, will take you to my penthouse in the Latte Tower. It's secured, soundproofed, and the press won't find you there. Your penthouse, the words came out as a squeak. The reality of her decision was crashing down, wave after terrifying wave. She was going to leave this lounge and go straight into the domestic sphere of Han Jun-suk. His gaze lifted from his phone, pinning her in place. This is no longer a game of subtlety, Ade. It's a complete takeover. You cannot go back to your apartment. It's been staked out by paparazzi and reporters since Minjae's video dropped. You are, as of this moment, under my protection, my control. That is non-negotiable. Protection. The word felt like a gilded cage. She wanted to argue, to reclaim some shred of agency, but the memory of the flashing cameras outside her building, the shouted, insensitive questions about her heritage and her social climbing failures, made her stomach clench. He was brutally right. Her old life was already a contaminated crime scene, unusable. Fine, she acquiesced, the word tasting like ash and defeat, yet oddly thrilling in its finality. He stood, a fluid, powerful motion, and extended a large, strong hand. It was not a gentle offer of assistance, but a silent, sensual command. After a moment's hesitation, Ade placed her smaller, warmer hand in his. His grip was firm, immediately possessive, his skin warm and slightly rough against hers. A jolt, sharp, unexpected, and electric, shot up her arm, straight to the center of her chest. She snatched her hand back the moment she was fully on her feet, disguising the movement by grabbing her clutch bag. If he noticed the electric current that had passed between them, he gave no indication. He simply guided her through the curtain, his large, muscular body forming a solid shield between her and the few other patrons in the lounge. The maitre d' was waiting, holding the side exit open. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Cullinan, looking more like a predatory beast than a vehicle, idled silently in the alley. Jun-suk opened the door for her, and she slid into the butter-soft leather interior. He didn't get in. Instead, he leaned down, his face close to hers, the scent of sandalwood, leather, and danger filling the space, making her head spin. "Alexander will see you settled. I have things to set in motion. I'll be there within the hour," he stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble that made the fine hairs on her neck stand up. His eyes held hers, and for a fleeting second, she saw something beyond the strategist, a flicker of raw, almost painful possessiveness, a hunger so deep it was visceral and terrifying. "Do not answer your phone. Do not speak to anyone. The narrative is ours to control now. Your past is irrelevant. Your future is Han." Before she could form a reply, he closed the door, sealing her in a tomb of silent, expensive luxury. The car pulled away smoothly, gliding through the Seoul night. She watched his dark, powerful form recede in the side mirror, a lone sentinel in the alley, before he turned and disappeared back inside, presumably to unleash his first strategic strike. The penthouse, perched atop the Latte Tower, was not a home. It was a statement. It occupied the entire top floor, a fortress of floor-to-ceiling glass, polished concrete, and minimalist furniture that cost more than Ade's entire career earnings. It was breathtaking, sterile, and utterly devoid of warmth, a gilded cage in the sky overlooking the glittering, endless sprawl of Seoul. True to his word, Han Jun-suk arrived just as a silent, efficient housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, was showing Ade to a guest suite that was, ironically, larger than her entire Gangnam apartment. He had shed his bespoke suit jacket, and the intricate tattoos on his forearms seemed even more pronounced under the cool, recessed lighting. He carried a sleek, black leather-bound portfolio. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to a stark white, low-slung sofa in the living area. It felt like sitting on a cloud in a museum exhibit. He opened the portfolio on the glass coffee table between them. Inside was not a prenuptial agreement, but what looked like a blueprint for a high-stakes military campaign. "This is the timeline," he began, his voice devoid of any emotion, yet vibrating with latent power. He pointed to a complex flowchart. "Tomorrow morning, a photo will be leaked to every major domestic and international tech outlet. It will show us in an intimate moment at the Lion tonight." Ade's breath hitched, the terror and the excitement a confusing mix in her chest. "A photo? But there was no one there." "You made sure. There's always someone there when you pay them to be, Ade," he replied flatly, without apology or conscience. "It will be grainy, suggestive, and timed perfectly. It will imply a long-standing, secret, passionate connection between us, one that explains your swift, decisive recovery from my brother's indiscretion. The world will believe you simply upgraded your partner and your position." The audacity of it stole her breath. He was rewriting history with a single, skillfully fabricated image, turning her from a victim into a player. "You're making me look like I was cheating too," she managed, her voice weak. "I'm making you look like a woman who had a powerful, desirable, backup plan," he corrected, his gaze sharp, unforgiving, yet intensely approving. It shifts the narrative from poor humiliated Ade Alayemi to Ade Alayemi trades in a cheap clone for the original. Perception is reality in the tech world. We are controlling the perception. Minj becomes a footnote. He gestured for her to look at the next page, a list of names, corporate entities, and dates. The wedding. 1 week from today. Small, exclusive. Only people who can be trusted to understand the new family dynamic, the new structure of power at Hantech. The what? The dynamic where I, the black sheep, the one my father barely acknowledged until I built a second, richer empire myself, have taken the prize he always intended for his golden boy, Minj. Jun-suk finished, a trace of genuine, resonant bitterness coloring his voice for the first time. This is as much for me as it is for you, Ade. Never forget that. The raw admission was a shock. She had been so wrapped in her own pain, she hadn't considered the deep-seated sibling rivalry, a rivalry she was now being ruthlessly weaponized in. And after the wedding, she asked, her throat tight, already knowing the answer would change her life forever. We present a united front, he stated simply. We are madly, passionately in love. It will be a performance worthy of a daesang for both of us. Any deviation gives Minj and hygiene ammunition. Any sign of fracture gives the vultures an opening to attack the Han group. We must be flawless, Ade. He leaned back, studying her, the controlled CEO momentarily replaced by something primal, something purely male and possessive. There will be rules for the public and rules for us. What rules for us? She whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound, yet her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The marriage will be real in every sense of the word, he stated, his voice dropping, becoming dangerously quiet, a promise and a threat rolled into one. He used a calculated precision that was entirely sensual. I do not share what is mine. This is not a temporary arrangement, Ade. This is a permanent alliance, a claim. I will be your husband in body and in name. Her heart hammered against her ribs, responding instantly, traitorously, to the implied intimacy. In every sense of the word. The unspoken implication was unmistakable. The tension that had been a faint hum since the lounge now roared to life between them, a live wire of attraction and sheer, terrifying possibility. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about possession, power, and the forbidden release they both knew they craved. You can't be serious, she breathed, trying to clutch at the remnants of her composure. I am never not serious, he countered, his stormy eyes locking onto hers. The heat in his gaze was a physical, demanding force. The chemistry between us is not a flaw in the plan, Ade. It is a weapon, a necessary component for our performance. And we will use it until it burns them and us to ash. Before she could formulate a response, her phone, which she had foolishly retrieved from her bag and placed on the coffee table, lit up. The screen showed a single, familiar name, Minj. They both looked at it. The buzzing was an angry, insistent vibration against the polished glass. Jun-suk's expression hardened, shifting into something cold and lethal. He reached out, not for the phone, but his large, tattooed hand covered hers where it rested on her knee. His touch was searing, a brand of instant, undeniable ownership that made her gasp. That, he said, his voice a low, possessive growl that scraped along her nerve endings, is the past. Are you ready to burn it, Ade? Ade looked from his hand on her leg, the heavy, possessive warmth of his skin against hers, to his intense, unyielding face, and then to the buzzing phone, the ghost of the life she'd lost. The pain, the pride, and the shocking, unwelcome thrill of his touch coalesced into a single undeniable truth. She picked up the phone, her finger hovering over the screen. With a final, decisive breath, she tapped decline. The buzzing stopped. She looked back at Jun-suk, a new resolve hardening her expression. Yes. A slow, dark, truly devastating smile finally spread across Han Jun-suk's face. It was the first real, unguarded emotion she'd seen from him, and it was more dangerous than all his cold, calculated control. The game had officially begun. The prize was everything. Share your initial reaction to Jun-suk's proposal in the comments. Hit the like button if you think this strategic alliance is already too hot to handle, and don't forget to subscribe to follow Ade's journey. The wedding was a masterpiece of strategic theater, a lightning-fast event orchestrated with brutal efficiency. It was held in the same gilded, high society church in Myeongdong where she was supposed to have married Minj. The choice was an act of such beautiful, brutal irony that Ade could only admire Jun-suk's sheer ruthlessness. The guest list was a fraction of the original, a curated collection of Seoul's most influential and gossipy tech elites, all there to witness the scandal's shocking, explosive second act. Ade walked down the impossibly long aisle alone, a statement in itself, a woman with no need for a male escort, reclaiming her space. She wore a different dress, miles away from the bohemian lace and tulle she'd painstakingly chosen with her mother. This was a sleek, architectural column of heavy ivory silk, severe, stunning, and utterly uncompromising. It was armor, a reflection of the hard-won pride she now wore. Her eyes were fixed, not on the stained glass window, but on the man waiting for her at the altar. Han Jun-suk stood with a stillness that was more intimidating than any fidgeting. He'd foregone a traditional Korean outfit for a bespoke black suit that hugged his powerful shoulders and muscular chest with unforgiving precision. The stark white of his shirt was a dramatic contrast against his dark, wavy hair, his pale skin, and the black ink that peeked from beneath his cuffs. He looked less like a groom and more like a king about to claim a contested throne, or a tech magnate performing a hostile corporate takeover. As she reached him, his gaze swept over her, a quick, assessing glance that held no trace of sentimental warmth. But it held something else, something that made the air compress in her lungs, a flicker of intense, deeply possessive approval, a dark recognition that sent a shiver down her spine. This was a transaction, a coronation, a declaration of dominance. It was everything but a love match. The vows were exchanged in cool, clear voices. His were a series of unwavering, low-voiced promises to honor, to protect, to cherish. They sounded less like romantic pledges and more like blood oaths etched into a legal contract. The moment the priest pronounced them man and wife, Jun-suk's large, warm hands came up to frame her face, his touch firm, deliberate. For the camera's Jagia, he murmured, the Korean endearment a low, rough sound that only she could hear, instantly igniting a chemical reaction between them. Then, he kissed her. It was not a chaste, ceremonial peck. It was a claiming. His mouth was firm, demanding, a controlled explosion of heat and purpose that stole the air from her lungs. He didn't just kiss her, he branded her, using his lips and the subtle pressure of his body against hers to erase the memory of his brother. It was over in seconds, but the imprint of his lips, the faint taste of whiskey and mint, lingered like a physical brand on her skin. A ripple of shocked, delighted whispers moved through the congregation. The message was set. The former fiancé was dead. The new, formidable husband had claimed his property. The reception at his sterile penthouse was a similarly tense affair. They stood together, a united front of impeccable, icy composure. They accepted backhanded compliments and thinly veiled probes with identical, polished smiles. Han Jun-suk's hand was a constant warm weight on the small of her back, a possessive anchor in the sea of prying, envious eyes. Once, she caught Min-jae's gaze from across the room. He had come brazenly, with hygiene clinging tightly to his arm, looking more like a terrified accessory than a triumphant new partner. His face was a mask of thunderous fury, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it might crack. Seeing him should have brought a surge of triumphant satisfaction. Instead, in the echoing, art-filled space she now had to call home, she felt only a hollow, dizzying sense of displacement. The victory felt empty, a mere prelude to the real battle. Finally, the last guest was ushered out. The silence that descended was heavier, more profound than any noise. The performance was over. They were alone. Jun-suk immediately retreated, the charming, possessive groom vanishing as if he'd shed a skin. He walked to the bar, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler, and downed it in one go, his back to her, the broad expanse of his shoulders taut with exhaustion and tension. "You played your part well, Ade," he said, his voice flat, drained of its earlier persuasive charm. "So did you," she replied, her own voice sounding small, suddenly vulnerable. She slipped off her devastatingly high heels, custom-made to give her just the right height, the cold, polished concrete floor a shock against her bare feet. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a crushing, aching fatigue in its wake. The weight of what she had done, marrying a stranger, burning her old life to the ground, aligning herself with a ruthless force, settled on her shoulders like a lead cloak. She walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glittering cityscape of Seoul that was now officially her view, her domain. Her reflection in the glass was a ghost, a beautiful, lonely woman in a stark white dress, in a home that wasn't hers. A single traitorous tear escaped, tracing a path through her perfectly applied makeup. She wiped it away angrily, but another followed, then another. She was so tired of being strong. For a moment, in the profound, isolating silence, she let the mask slip entirely, her shoulders slumping in defeat, a raw, defeated sigh escaping her lips. She didn't hear him approach. The man was a panther, moving silently despite his size. Ade. His voice was closer, softer than it had been all day, a low rumble that resonated in her chest. She stiffened, hastily wiping her cheeks, but didn't turn. His hands came to rest on her shoulders from behind. She flinched, the slight, involuntary recoil of a wounded animal, but he didn't remove his hands. His touch was different now, devoid of the possessive brand of the groom or the strategic prop for the guests. It was just a touch, steady and grounding. His thumbs began to move in slow, deliberate, intensely sensual circles against the tight, stressed muscles of her upper back, beneath the silk of the dress. "Don't," she whispered, the word a plea and a warning simultaneously. "Don't what?" His voice was a low, warm murmur near her ear, the breath tickling the fine hairs of her neck. "Acknowledge that this is hell? That what we did today was brutal and necessary, but it was still brutal, still a sacrifice." His understanding was more disarming than any anger, any cold indifference. The careful walls she had built around her heart over the last week cracked another inch, yielding to the unexpected empathy. She leaned back, just slightly, into his touch, an unconscious, primal surrender. He turned her slowly to face him. The cold strategist was gone, replaced by a man whose eyes held a reflection of her own turmoil, her own raw nerve endings. The blazing tension that had been a constant, aggressive humming undercurrent between them since the lounge suddenly ignited, superheating the air around them, turning the vast room into an intensely intimate, confined space. This wasn't part of the plan, she breathed, her gaze dropping, fixated on the curve of his mouth, the mouth that had just claimed her in front of the world. "No," he agreed, his voice rough with suppressed need. "It wasn't." He didn't kiss her with the calculated performance of the church. This kiss was a conflagration. It was all the suppressed fury, the shared pain, the dangerous, forbidden attraction they had been denying, unleashed in a single, devastating, desperate moment. His hands tangled, not gently, in her long, wavy hair, tilting her head back as his mouth plundered hers with a desperate, hungry intensity that demanded every piece of her. She met him with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck, her fingers digging into the hard, thick muscle of his shoulders, finding immediate, necessary purchase in his strength. The sleek, architectural dress was peeled away, the heavy silk falling to the floor in a shimmering, discarded heap. His impeccably tailored suit followed, discarded ruthlessly in a pile on the cold concrete. There, against the cool glass, with the entire, glittering, unsuspecting city of Seoul spread out below them, 1,000 lights witnessing their forbidden union, the line between revenge and desire, between strategy and need, evaporated entirely. It was not gentle. It was a collision, a storm of grasping hands, bruising kisses, and raw, unfiltered passion that spoke louder than any words. It was him branding his name onto her soul, and her clawing her way into his guarded heart. The sight of his powerful, tattooed body moving against her, the controlled savagery in his touch, the guttural sounds he couldn't suppress, it was a betrayal of everything she thought she stood for, and yet, it felt dangerously, profoundly right. When he finally drove into her, a broken, low, guttural Korean sound escaping his throat. It felt less like a first time and more like a homecoming to a place she never knew existed, a dark, exhilarating space of shared passion and vengeance. If you're feeling the heat of this betrayal and passion, smash that like button and tell us in the comments what you think Jun-suk's next move should be. They collapsed onto the vast, impersonal rug, tangled in the ruins of their wedding clothes, their breathing slowly returning to normal in the dark. The city lights painted shifting, cool patterns across their heated, sweat-slicked skin. His arm was a heavy, possessive weight across her waist, his body a solid wall of heat at her back, shielding her from the cold glass. No words were spoken. The carefully constructed rules of their arrangement had been utterly shattered by the undeniable truth of their physical and emotional chemistry. The game had changed. As Ade drifted into an exhausted, sated sleep, one terrifying, exhilarating thought echoed in the silence. The revenge had begun, but the war for their hearts, a war she was terrified she was already losing, had just started. The penthouse was no longer a sterile museum. It was now a charged battlefield, the air thick with the ghosts and scents of their wedding night, infused with the dangerous knowledge of their connection. Ade moved through the sprawling space with a new, unsettling awareness. Every sleek surface, every expanse of glass, seemed to hold the memory of Jun-suk's touch, the echo of his low, guttural groans. He had been true to his word. The marriage was real in every sense. But it wasn't the cold, transactional consummation he had outlined in his strategic portfolio. It had been raw, desperate, earth-shattering, and it had changed everything, deepening their alliance into something terrifyingly personal. Han Jun-suk was different now. The icy control was still there, a default setting for the outside world, for the demands of running a global tech empire. But with her, in the privacy of their gilded cage, a new facet had emerged, a dark, simmering possessiveness, an insatiable hunger. It was in the way his hand would find the small of her back when they passed in the hallway, a casual, non-negotiable claim that always made her breath catch. It was in the way his stormy eyes would track her across a room, hot and intent, as if she were the only point of focus in his complex universe. He didn't speak of love, didn't offer sweet nothings, but his language was one of searing looks, demanding touches, and intensely physical validation, a silent, constant reminder that she was his. Ade was adrift. The clean, sharp lines of her revenge strategy were hopelessly blurring. Waking up tangled in his sheets, his large, tattooed arm a heavy, welcome weight across her body, felt dangerously, organically right. The way he could make her forget her own name, her own pain, with a single, skillful brush of his thumb against her inner wrist was a betrayal of her own calculated heart. She had sworn to use him, to stand beside him as an equal partner in Minj's destruction. She hadn't accounted for the way her body, her treacherous heart, and her deep-seated pride would align with the enemy, turning their pact into a true, burning union. She was in the kitchen, a vast expanse of stainless steel and imported marble, trying to find solace in the simple, familiar ritual of making a cup of Nigerian tea, when her phone vibrated on the marble countertop. An unknown Korean number. A part of her, the part still loyal to the pragmatic woman she was a week ago, knew she should let it go to voicemail. But curiosity and a lingering, foolish thread of connection to her past made her answer. Ade? The voice was a familiar, honeyed poison. Minj. Her entire body went rigid, the tension immediately returning. How did you get this number? She asked, her voice tight formal. I have my ways. You know that, he countered, his voice strained, laced with a pleading, carefully crafted note she recognized as a performance. We need to talk, Ade. What Jun-suk has done, marrying you, stealing you like this, it's monstrous, it's a power play. A cold, bitter laugh escaped her. You have a fascinating definition of monstrous, Minj. I believe your public scandal with my stepsister, Hygiene, a week before our wedding, holds that particular title. He was silent for a beat, and when he spoke again, the pleading was gone, replaced by a sharp, manipulative edge. You think you know him? You think you've tamed the great Han Jun-suk, the tech titan who runs on pure ruthlessness? He's using you, Ade. Just like he uses everyone. He's been obsessed with you for years. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you he watched every interaction, every smile you gave me, hoarding it like a miser? The words landed like a physical blow. Obsessed for years. They echoed Jun-suk's own admission in the lounge. What should have been mine from the start? A shiver, equal parts fear and a strange, unwelcome, exhilarating thrill, traced her spine. He's a collector, Minj pressed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, his tone dripping with false concern. And he'll break you when he's bored. He has secrets. Dark ones. Corporate secrets. Family secrets. Things that would make what I did look like a childish prank with hygiene. Secrets that could shatter the Han Group's stock entirely. Meet me, he urged, his voice desperate now. Let me prove it to you. Let me show you the truth about the man you just married in a desperate act of revenge. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the cold marble counter. This was the opening Jun-suk had warned her about. Minj was trying to plant seeds of doubt, to fracture their alliance from within. She knew she should hang up. She should immediately tell Jun-suk. But the seed was planted, the word secrets resonating with her own doubts about the man she was falling for. I have nothing to say to you, Minj, she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to keep it steady. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. The conservatory at the Ridge Hotel. If you don't come, I'll know he's already twisted your mind and caged your independence. I still love you, Ade. I'm trying to save you from him. The line went dead with a soft click. Ade stood there, clutching the cold marble counter, her knuckles white. The soothing, complex scent of her tea suddenly seemed cloying and weak. You look pale, Jagia. She jumped, spinning around violently. Han Jun-suk stood in the doorway, having entered as silently as a leopard. He was still in his workout clothes, black sweats and a form-fitting t-shirt, a sheen of sweat on his handsome temples, his stormy gray eyes missing nothing. He looked intensely masculine, powerful, and utterly formidable. How much had he heard? Just a headache, she lied, turning back to her tea, focusing intensely on the tiny wisps of steam. He crossed the room in a few long strides, his powerful presence immediately swallowing the vast space. He didn't stop until he was directly behind her, his body not touching hers, but close enough that she could feel the intense heat radiating from his muscular frame. He placed his large hands on the counter on either side of her, caging her in against the cold marble, an intensely possessive physical trap. Who was on the phone, Ade? His voice was deceptively soft, a dangerous purr. Her mind raced. To tell him would be to admit she'd engaged with the enemy. To lie would be a betrayal of the already fragile trust they had built, a betrayal of the new world they inhabited. It was a wrong number, Jun-suk. He was silent for a long, tense moment. The silence was heavier, more charged than any argument. Then, one of his hands left the counter. He didn't touch her body, but his long, strong fingers gently brushed a stray curl of her wavy hair away from her neck. The contact was electric, a deliberate, sensual reminder of the profound intimacy they now shared. Lying to me is a very bad idea, Ade, he murmured, his lips close to her ear, his breath warm and minty. We are a team. We are a unified front. There is no room for secrets between us. Not when the wolves are at the door, and those wolves carry our family name. He knew. He had to know. The possessiveness in his tone wasn't just about claiming her body or her status. It was about claiming her loyalty, her truth, her very soul. She turned slowly within the circle of his arms to face him, the raw need and the simmering anger warring within her. And what about your secrets, Han Jun-suk? The dark ones. The ones Minj implied could crash the entire Han tech empire. His eyes narrowed immediately, the storm in them gathering force. He searched her face, and she saw the exact moment he pieced together the entirety of Minj's call. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking violently in his cheek. Minj, he breathed, the name a curse, a sound of pure disgust. What did he say to you? He said you've been obsessed with me for years. He said you have secrets that would make his pathetic affair look like a prank, that you're a thief who stole his life's work to build your empire. She met his gaze, her chin lifted in defiance, challenging him to deny the core truth of his hidden desire. Jun-suk didn't deny it. Instead, a slow, dark, terrifyingly confident smile spread across his face, the same smile he'd given her when she declined Min-jae's call. "Good," he said, his voice a low, possessive rumble that vibrated through her core. "Let him talk. Let him reveal his hand. Let him use his venom." His hands came up again to frame her face, his grip firm, forcing her to hold his intense, unyielding gaze. "But understand this, Ade Alayemi, you are mine. Whatever he says, whatever dark truth he thinks he knows, it changes nothing between us. It only strengthens my claim." He crushed his mouth to hers in a kiss that was all branding possession and furious promise. It wasn't about passion this time. It was about dominance, a physical assertion of their bond, a warning and a claim all rolled into one. And as her body responded against her will, melting instantly into his, Ade knew the most dangerous secret wasn't Jun-suk's past. It was the terrifying, undeniable truth that she was starting to love the very man she had married for revenge, the man who was now claiming her with such beautiful, ruthless authority. The attack began at dawn, not with a single brutal blow, but with a series of precise, venomous leaks, timed with surgical precision to coincide with the opening of the Seoul stock market. Ade's phone buzzed itself off the nightstand, a frantic, dying insect on the polished floor. She fumbled for it, her heart already sinking with a cold dread she knew too well. The screen was a mosaic of alerts from news outlets, tech blogs, and friends. Black gold digger victim Ade Alayemi's troubled past revealed. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It detailed her mother's long struggle with addiction back in her home country, the childhood years Ade had spent navigating complicated, precarious situations before her quiet, kind father. A Korean-American engineer she'd only known for a few short years before his untimely death had gained custody and brought her to Seoul. It painted her as a social climber from damaged goods, implying she'd latched onto the Han family for stability, wealth, and a legitimate place in Korean society. Hygiene's signature was all over it. The intimate, vicious details could only have come from a family member who resented her success. A second headline followed minutes later, aimed directly at the heart of their new alliance, Han Group heirs shadows, Jun-suk's alleged role in multi-billion-dollar tech sabotage. This piece resurrected an old, sealed scandal from Jun-suk's early 20s, a startup he'd been involved with that had spectacularly collapsed, with the original founder accusing Jun-suk of stealing proprietary network architecture and selling it to a competing U.S. firm. The case had been settled out of court, sealed under a mountain of Han Group money and legal muscle. Until now. Jun-suk stood by the massive window, his back to her, his phone pressed to his ear as he issued terse, low-voiced commands to his legal team, his voice clipped and cold. The tension in his broad, powerful shoulders was a physical, almost visible thing. The tech titan's fleece was being publicly tarred. "They're coordinated, Jun-suk," Ade said, her voice thin, her own exposed past leaving her feeling naked and raw. "Hygiene and Minj. Of course they are," Jun-suk replied, ending the call with a brutal finality. He turned, his face a mask of cold fury, but his eyes, when they met hers, held no judgment for her past, only a blazing, protective anger at its exposure. "Minj provides the access to my dirt. Hygiene provides the poison about your history. It's a predictable alliance of mediocrity and spite." He crossed the room and gently took her phone from her limp hand, placing it face down on the dresser. "Don't read it. My team is already issuing cease and desists and preparing defamation suits that will financially cripple Hygiene. This is noise, Ade. Designed to distract us." Noise. A small, hysterical laugh bubbled in her throat. "They're tearing us apart, Jun-suk. They're exposing every fragile part of me. They're trying," he corrected, his voice dropping, becoming dangerously calm, intensely reassuring. He cupped her face in his large hand, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender, so immediately protective, it made her eyes sting anew. "They can't tear us apart unless we let them. Your past is a part of you. It made you strong, it made you survive and build a new life in a foreign country. I will not allow them to weaponize it against you." You are the CEO's wife now. You are protected by the full power of the Han Group. His defense of her, so fierce and immediate, unraveled her more than the headlines ever could. He saw the fracture in her composure and pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face in the soft cotton of his T-shirt, breathing in the scent of him, sandalwood, sweat, and absolute, unwavering resolve. I need to work from the study today. Damage control, he murmured into her hair, holding her tightly. Stay away from the news feeds. Order anything you want, but do not leave this penthouse. It is an order, but it is also my guarantee of your safety. It was an order, but it felt entirely like protection, a warm, safe blanket in a cold, venomous world. She nodded against his chest, drawing strength from his physical presence. Once he was sequestered in his heavily soundproof study, the silence of the penthouse became oppressive. Ade wandered, a ghost in her own gilded cage. She ended up in his private library, a room she'd rarely entered, lined with leather-bound volumes on economic theory, network architecture, and first-edition Korean novels. She trailed her fingers along the spines, seeking a distraction, a thread of the man behind the ruthless CEO. Her hand stilled on a small, unassuming, worn leather sketchbook wedged tightly between two heavy volumes of Roman history. It was profoundly out of place among the stark intellectualism of the room. Curiosity piqued, turning into a sudden, urgent need to know. She pulled it out. The cover was worn, the pages thick and slightly rough to the touch. She opened it, and her breath caught, lodging painfully in her throat. The first page was a highly detailed sketch of a woman's hands, delicate and strong, holding a coffee cup, her hands. The next, a study of a profile, her profile, focused intensely on the soft curve of her lips and the delicate swoop of her nose. Page after page was filled with her. Ade, laughing at a Han Group charity gala 2 years ago, the one where she'd worn the emerald green hanbok-style dress. Ade looking pensive, staring out a window at a family gathering. Ade catching a glimpse of Minjae's father with a soft, genuine smile on her face. There were dozens of them, each one rendered with a startling, intimate precision. They weren't the rushed scribbles of a casual observer. They were the studied, detailed works of someone who had watched, memorized, and longed for every single curve, every single expression. The dates scrolled in the corners were from over 3 years ago, long before the affair, long before the betrayal. Minjae's words echoed in her mind, transformed from a curse into a devastating truth. He's been obsessed with you for years. This wasn't the portfolio of a strategist. This was the silent, desperate journal of a man in love, a hidden, hungry, all-consuming love that had waited patiently in the shadows. The final drawing made her legs give way. She sank onto a nearby armchair, the sketchbook trembling violently in her hands. It was a recent drawing, unmistakably so. It was her asleep in their massive bed. The white sheets were tangled around her curvy waist, her head turned against the pillow, her expression one of utter, peaceful vulnerability. The rendering was so tender, so reverent, so deeply emotional, it brought hot, immediate tears to her eyes. He hadn't just desired her. He had drawn her like she was everything, his peace, his muse, his only sanctuary. The door to the library opened softly. Han Jun-suk stood there, his face etched with the heavy strain of the day's damage control. He saw the open sketchbook in her lap, saw the immediate, raw emotion flooding her face, and his entire powerful body went still. The mask of the ruthless billionaire shattered, revealing a raw, profound vulnerability she had never witnessed before. He looked exposed, caught in his most private confession. "You," she whispered, the word thick with awe and accusation, her voice barely a breath. All this time, he didn't move. He just watched her, his stormy eyes now filled with a quiet, aching, undeniable truth. All this time, he confirmed, his voice rough with years of suppressed longing. "I couldn't have you, Ade. You were a prize already claimed, destined for my brother. So, I captured you the only way I could. In lines and shadows. In paper and ink." The confession, so simple and yet so devastating in its magnitude, shattered the last of her defenses. All the calculated moves, the strategic marriage, the intensely possessive touches, they were all built on a foundation of genuine, desperate, all-consuming want. He hadn't just seen her as a weapon to destroy Minj. He had seen her as the true prize, the only thing worth fighting his entire family for. She stood, the sketchbook falling to the chair with a soft thud, and crossed the vast room to him. She didn't stop until she was inches from him, her head tilted back to meet his intensely dark gaze. The air crackled between them with a desire so pure, so intensely focused, it was almost holy. All those times at family events, you were watching. Always. Always, he repeated, his voice a low, gravelly vow. Watching my brother take for granted the only thing I ever truly wanted in this life. It was a special kind of hell for me, Ade. Something wild and long-suppressed broke free inside her. It wasn't just desire now, it was a fierce, answering need, a recognition of the same raw hunger she saw blazing in his eyes, a feeling of being understood and seen for the first time. She reached up, her fingers curling into the soft, wavy hair at the nape of his neck, and pulled his mouth down to hers with a desperate urgency. This kiss was a conflagration of 3 years of pent-up longing, of stolen glances, of suppressed touches. It was a symphony of teeth and tongue and desperate, gasping breaths. It was an answer to all his unspoken questions, a complete, total surrender to the truth they could no longer deny or contain. He groaned, a deep, feral sound torn from his chest, and his large, muscular arms banded around her, lifting her instantly off her feet as if she weighed nothing. He carried her, without breaking the desperate seal of their lips, through the foyer and into the bedroom. This was not the slow, exploratory passion of their wedding night. This was raw, explosive, and emotionally charged, a physical conversation of all the words the sketchbook had confessed. His hands were everywhere, mapping her curvy body as if memorizing her anew, without the barrier of secrecy or the shame of hidden desire. Her own hands tore at his t-shirt, buttons pinging against the floor, as she sought the immediate feel of his warm, hard skin under her palms, over the powerful beat of his heart. When he entered her, it was with a guttural cry of her name, a sound of pure, agonized release and overwhelming relief. She met his powerful thrusts with equal fervor, her nails digging into the intricate tattoos on his back, her long legs locked around his waist, pulling him deeper, demanding more. It was a claiming, a confession, a fusion of two lonely, damaged souls finding perfect, necessary alignment. In the height of it, as she shattered around him, crying out his Korean name, and he followed with a broken, triumphant groan, Ade knew with absolute, terrifying certainty that she was irrevocably, dangerously, beautifully in love with her husband. The ruthless tech mogul she had married for revenge. If your heart is pounding after that confession, hit the like button. Don't forget to comment on whether Ade should forgive Jun-suk's secrets and subscribe for the next chapter of the Han group drama. They lay tangled together, their breathing slowly returning to normal, surrounded by the quiet scent of the sheets and their own spent passion. His forehead was resting against hers, his eyes closed. For the first time since she had met him, Han Jun-suk looked completely at peace. The relentless CEO momentarily vanished. Ade, he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, the single word a universe of promise and a silent plea. She traced the sharp, handsome line of his jaw, her heart so full it ached with a terrifying, overwhelming joy. Jun-suk. The sharp, insistent buzz of the penthouse intercom sliced through the moment like a shard of glass, instantly shattering the fragile peace. Jun-suk stiffened immediately, his eyes flying open. The peace vanished, replaced by instant, weary tension and a familiar, cold vigilance. "Ignore it," he growled, dipping his head to nuzzle her neck, trying to pull her back into the sanctuary of the sheets. But the buzzing was relentless and angry, persistent alarm that signaled danger. A cold dread trickled down Ade's spine. She pushed gently at his shoulders, her eyes wide with fear. Jun-suk. With a curse, he lifted himself off her, grabbing his discarded trousers and striding toward the intercom panel on the wall. He jabbed the button with furious force. "I said I was not to be disturbed," he snarled into the speaker, his voice a low, lethal warning. The voice that crackled back was smooth, triumphant, and utterly venomous. It was Minj. I know you're both there, brother, and I think you'll want to see what I have. Unless you want me to send it directly to the New York Times tech desk. I have the file, Jun-suk. The real one. The one that proves everything. Jun-suk's face went pale beneath his tan, a sheen of immediate sweat appearing on his brow. The raw vulnerability she had just witnessed vanished, replaced by a look of such pure, unadulterated panic that Ade's blood ran cold. She had never seen him afraid. Not once. What file? She asked, pulling the sheets tighter to her chest, her voice trembling with rising terror. Jun-suk didn't answer. His knuckles were white where he gripped the intercom panel. Don't, he managed into the speaker, his voice low and deadly, the sound of a man begging. Too late for that, brother, Minj chirped back, a triumphant laugh echoing through the speaker. I'm in your lobby. Let me up in 1 minute, or I press send. Your choice. The connection went dead. The silence in the room was now deafening, heavy with the ghost of their passion and the looming threat. Jun-suk turned to face her, and the look in his eyes, a mixture of shame, fear, and a desperate plea for understanding, shattered the beautiful, fragile trust they had just built with their hearts. Jun-suk, Ade said, her voice a broken whisper as she hugged herself tightly. What is he talking about? What foul could possibly make you look like that? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The man who had just worshipped her body with such raw, hungry passion was now a fortress of terrified silence. The elevator dinged from the foyer, signaling its ascent. Minj was coming up, and he was bringing with him the evidence that could destroy not just Jun-suk's empire, but the entire, shaky foundation of their marriage. The elevator's soft chime was a death knell. They had hastily moved to the library, the scene of their passionate confession now a cold room of impending judgment. Ade stood frozen in the center of the library, the scent of their passion still clinging to her skin, now feeling like a shameful stain. Jun-suk stood between her and the doorway, a statue of tension, his earlier vulnerability replaced by a grim, defensive posture. Minj didn't wait for an invitation. He strode into the library as if he still owned a piece of the world he'd been banished from. His eyes, bright with malicious triumph, swept over the disheveled room, the scattered papers, Ade's hastily donned silk robe. The raw intimacy was hanging visibly in the air. A smug smirk twisted his lips. Touching, brother. But the honeymoon is officially over. He held up a sleek, black flash drive. Get out, Minj. Jun-suk's voice was low, a predator's warning growl that barely masked his fear. Or what? You'll have me thrown out? I'd love to see you try. It would only make the headlines even better, Minj drawled, his gaze flicking contemptuously to Ade. He hasn't told you, has he, Ade? Of course not. He's built his entire tech empire, his entire persona, on this one beautiful, self-serving lie. What lie? Ade's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes fixed desperately on Jun-suk, pleading for a denial, for an explanation, for a continuation of the tender man she had just loved. Jun-suk remained silent, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. He had nothing left to give. The star-up I told you about, Ade, Minj continued, enjoying his moment center stage. The one he supposedly sabotaged? It wasn't his technology to steal. It was mine. My innovation, my network code. The world tilted violently for Ade. She shook her head. No, that's not what the article said. It said it was the founder, a separate party. I was the founder. Minj snapped, his composure cracking to reveal the festering bitterness beneath. It was my idea, my code, my future. But who would back Minj Han, the charming, reckless party boy? No one. But they would back my serious, ruthless older brother. He agreed to front the company, to be the public face of the genius. And when it came time to sell the core tech to the US firm, he cut me out. He took my life's work, sold it for millions, and left me with nothing but a sealed settlement and a gag order paid for with our father's money. Minj took a deliberate step toward Ade, his eyes pitiless. The great black sheep, the self-made billionaire, the visionary behind Han Tech's biggest merger? It's a fairy tale, Ade. The Han fortune funded his start, but my mind built the core innovation. He's not a genius. He's a thief. He stole from his own brother long before he stole you. It's a pattern of total dominance. Tell me, Ade, what will he take from you when he's bored of his prize? The revelation landed like a physical blow, sucking all the remaining air from the room. Ade looked at Jun-suk, searching desperately for the man who had just looked at her with such devotion. She saw only a guilty, cornered, and deeply ashamed animal. Jun-suk, she breathed, her heart cracking in her chest. Is it true? All of it. He finally met her gaze, his eyes dark with a torment so profound it was almost tangible. Ade, it's not that simple. It was business. I kept the intellectual property safe. He would have ruined it. It seems very simple, Minj interjected gleefully. He saw something he wanted, my company, then my fiancé, and he took it. End of story. Before Jun-suk could form a coherent response, before Ade could demand the full, unvarnished truth, their phones erupted in a simultaneous, deafening chorus of alerts, then another and another, ringing in chaotic unison. The color drained completely from Jun-suk's face. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his hand trembling as he read the screen. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. Ade, her own hands shaking uncontrollably, fumbled for her phone. The notification was from a prominent international gossip site. The headline was in screaming, all caps Korean and English. Sabotaged sister. Hygiene reveals Ade seduced Minj to steal Han fortune, plotting with Jun-suk all along. Beneath it was a series of fabricated text messages, skillfully photoshopped but terrifyingly convincing, showing intimate, flirtatious exchanges between her and Minj from over a year ago. Another set of messages, time-stamped just after the scandal broke, showed a cold, calculating plan between her and Jun-suk to discredit Minj and seize control of the family's business interests. Hygiene's heartfelt statement detailed how her own affair with Minj was a desperate, failed attempt to save him from Ade's cold, manipulative clutches. It was a lie, a monstrous, brilliant, and devastating lie. It painted her not as a victim, but as the mastermind. It recast Jun-suk not as her savior, but as her cold, predatory co-conspirator. Their entire narrative was inverted in a single, ruinous instant. No, Ade gasped, the phone slipping from her numb fingers and clattering onto the marble floor. The world swam. The walls of the beautiful penthouse closed in on her. This was more than humiliation. This was annihilation. Her reputation, her integrity, the very moral fiber of her character, was being publicly eviscerated. She looked from Minjae's smug, triumphant face to Jun-suk's horrified, panicked one. One brother had just revealed Jun-suk as a fraud who built his empire on theft. The other had just recast their entire marriage as a sordid, premeditated scheme. She couldn't breathe. Ade, listen to me, Jun-suk said, his voice strained, taking a frantic step toward her. This is what they do. They lie. We will fight this, Jagia. Together. Together. A broken, hysterical laugh escaped her throat. You lied to me from the very beginning, Han Jun-suk. You let me believe you were this self-made tech titan. You built this, our alliance, on a lie about your empire. How can I believe anything you say now? How can I stand next to you, a co-conspirator in a lie, when I don't even know which version of you is real? The raw pain in her voice seemed to physically wound him. He flinched, the fear in his eyes now a tidal wave of panic and despair. He was losing her. He could see it happening in real time, the connection they had forged moments ago disintegrating into dust. Please, he whispered, the word torn from him, the most vulnerable, desperate sound she had ever heard him make. Don't leave. We can fix this. But it was too late. The foundations of their world, built on a shaky pact of revenge and a newly discovered, fragile love, had been utterly demolished by the truth and the new, devastating lie. Without another word, Ade turned and walked away from him. She moved past Minj, who watched her with victorious, poisonous pity, and out of the library. Ade, stop. Jun-suk's voice was a raw, desperate command, echoing in the vast, cold space. She didn't stop. She walked through the foyer, her steps echoing in the silent, glass-walled space toward the elevator. She could feel his gaze burning into her back, feel his terror at the prospect of her walking out that door, the door to the woman he had silently loved for years, the woman he had finally claimed as his own. She pressed the button. The doors slid open with a soft, final sigh. She stepped inside, and as the doors began to close, severing the connection, she allowed herself one last, painful look at him. Han Jun-suk stood at the entrance to the library, his face a mask of utter devastation, his hand outstretched as if he could pull her back across the impossible distance that now separated them. The doors closed, silencing the plea. Inside the elevator, Ade slumped against the wall, the sobs finally breaking free. Outside, Han Jun-suk stood alone in the ruins of his carefully crafted world, watching the only thing that had ever truly mattered to him disappear, terrified that he had lost her